Welcome to A Better HR Business, the podcast that looks at how HR consultants and HR tech firms grow their businesses and how they help their employers to get the best out of their people. Remember, for show notes and downloads, go to www.getmorehrclients.com/podcast. That's getmorehrclients.com/podcast. Okay, let's get started.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Great to have you along. And I'm really looking forward to today's conversation with Diane Faulkner. Diane is a fascinating person and she's built an amazing HR consulting business called Human Resources Made Easy. And we're going to dive into the services the business offers and so on. But firstly, Diane, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So yeah, I want to dive into Human Resources Made Easy. But firstly, can I just ask you to take a step back and give us, an introduction to your HR background and what led you to the formation of the business?
Okay. Well, my HR background is, before I went out on my own, I was a VP HR of Human Resources for a credit union here in Jacksonville, Florida. And I have now 42 years in HR.
Nice.
17 are in corporate, and then the rest of it is just on my own, and also 27 years of writing and speaking on HR. So that's the basic background.
Nice. When you were leading to the formation of the business, you could have done anything. What led you to create the business Human Resources Made Easy and start that?
When I was still in corporate, when I was still at the credit union, I had started writing and speaking on HR. I got asked to, which is kind of funny, I got asked to write a feature for one of our trade magazines. This is back when the internet first came about. And remember those executive rooms that everyone would have, and my president was in one of those executive chat rooms, and the editor-in-chief of one of our trade journals was in the room, and she posed a question to everyone, and my president came to me and he said, "Answer this for me." So I'm like, okay.
Make me look good.
Well, when he hired me, he actually said that. He said, "I don't know what you're supposed to be doing. Just make me look good. That's all I ask." I'm like, okay. But he asked me to answer the question for him. And the way that the editor asked the question is a way that I can't stand it when journalists ask questions this way. They ask a question in such a way that you can only answer one way.
Oh, okay. Leading
Yeah.
question. Yeah.
Very leading question. And so I acknowledged that at the beginning. I said, I know that this is the answer that you're looking for, and this is the answer that I'm going to give you. But in order to get to this answer, you have to go through 18 months of this. So I explained what you had to go through to get to that point. And she said, "Oh, this is fantastic. Would you mind writing a feature for us?"
Wow.
And that's what started my writing career right there. And other credit unions noticed my writing, and I got started speaking. Well, when FMLA came about, they didn't have a key man provision, and I had to make a choice of to take care of my father or stay at work. So I had to leave, and I thought, what am I going to do? So I kept writing, I kept speaking, and I thought, I was on the CUNA HR Council, Credit Union National Association HR Council, and I was helping credit unions, which are mainly small businesses across the country, with their compliance issues. And I thought I could do that. That's what I'll do. I'll just be human resources for small businesses. And that's where Human Resources came about.
I love the name too, by the way. That's very clever. I know you've done a lot of writing. So Forbes, US News and World Report, Legal, Zoom, the list goes on. You obviously enjoy it.
I love it.
What do you write about?
Well, I write about compliance issues. I write about managing people within the law, leadership, anything that has to do with running a small business. I write about that. But I mostly enjoy writing about the compliance issues. I have a love for that. When I was young, my family worked for General Motors. My whole family worked for General Motors.
Wow.
And so the dinner talk around the table would be about, what was going on with the strike, or, what was going on with the union. It was always labor talk around the table. And then when I graduated high school, I actually stepped into a management position right out of high school, and which is anathema,
Big step. Yeah. Oh, I see. From the labor side of things. Yeah.
So I'm on the employment side. I stepped into a management position, but I thought, I have a good, solid background in what employees want because I grew up with all of that.
Big time. Yeah.
Yeah. And when I took that further as I, progressed through college, and studied labor law and employment law and industrial and organizational psychology. My degrees are in psychology, clinical psychology, and industrial and organizational psychology. So I could kind of be like a shrink to an organization.
And to the labor force, I'm guessing, in meetings.
Yes, absolutely. So basically, where everything came from.
Oh, that's interesting because I actually started similar sort of studies and things like that. But yeah, my first boss, he came out of the union movement and he was an HR manager. But as you say, he understood where they were coming from, what was driving them. He could also talk to them and say, look, I get it, but just to do things a certain way or reduce costs or do this or do that. And it did work better. Yeah.
Yeah, you can speak the language of the employee. At least that's how I felt. I could speak the language of the employee, but I also understood the business side of it. So I could translate basically what was going on. I mean, even when I had to fire people, it wasn't a big, cry fest. When I would fire people, people would know if they came to my office, someone's leaving, it's not going to be me. It's going to be them because they didn't follow the goals they set out for themselves. They didn't meet them.
Yeah.
So when I left the credit union, even the people I had fired had come back to see me off.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah. So I was really touched by that.
Yeah. It showed the level of respect in both directions. Yeah.
I have thank you letters from people who I have fired. I let them know this might be a better path for you. So it's kind of nice.
Respectfully, yeah. What are the actual services that human resources made easy? You said that it's compliance for SMEs, really. So is that around contracts and, what are the main pain points that you solve for them? And then do you serve that in just a monthly service or does projects? How does it work?
About the only projects that I do would be writing the employee handbooks or reviewing their handbooks and then rewriting whatever it needs to be rewritten. But other than that, I would do like I-9 audits. I would come in and do their employee versus independent contractor audits.
Oh, yeah, the classic. Yeah.
The classification audits that small businesses, God love them, they don't really understand that line that you have to be aware of when it comes to independent contractor. You'd think,
yeah,
I'm just going to hire someone for a short amount of time, but if it's an integral part of your business and that's what you do, they're an employee basically, especially when you're telling them how to do the work and you're saying, and I want you to use this equipment and making the decisions for them and everything like that. They still are not getting that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And the types of clients that you would have, are you their only HR source or are you helping the sole HR person? Or, often there's an office manager who's kind of been given the HR stuff to do. Who do you help inside the business?
Inside the smaller businesses, the micro businesses, I call them, I'm helping the CEO because they got no one that's doing the HR function. That person is the only one doing the HR function and they're driving themselves crazy because there's so much to keep up with. But the rest of them are, they have a secretary who's handling the recruiting and that type of thing, and they just don't know what to do when things come up. I've got an executive HR on call service, which is a retainer service.
Nice.
And so anytime there's a problem that comes up, they can just call me or email me, and I'm there to help solve the problem because they don't have an HR person available.
And so they can just, as a retainer, like a subscription service, so they know they've got someone on standby that they can trust, who knows the business inside out, who knows the people, and just can handle the questions.
And I can also come on, and as they have managers or, create managers, I can come in and I can train the managers on the different employment laws that they need to be aware of and how to recruit and that type of thing.
In many countries, US included, there are some big chain companies in different places. It's like the big insurance company, they add on an HR inquiries line. How do you position yourself against those sort of mega corps that I have my own views, by the way, but I'd be curious, how do you position yourself and show you the value against those sort of options?
Well, I position myself with my background, with my years of experience. A lot of the on-call that you get from the big businesses, there are people who might not even have a PHR. So they're basically looking up in a book, whatever it is. Yeah. Whereas I've lived their experience. These people have not lived their experience. And my clients seem to like that.
So yeah, a couple of things spring to mind. When I was doing my studies, I was one of those people on those sort of phone lines I had no clue what I was answering, and I had
Yeah,
to go and randomly search stuff and hope that it was correct answer. So that could be what they're paying for at that basic level. And then secondly, the advice they may get may be technically correct, but what's the impact it's going to have? We were talking about labour force, unions and just groups of employees. The information needs to be communicated in a certain way, or perhaps it needs to be prepared and planned for,
right,
not just bang, here's the information, because that could
right.
start all sorts of trouble.
Yeah, and I can help communicate any of the changes or any of the updates or anything. I can help communicate that in the ways that are not going to get them in trouble
Yeah, exactly.
and that employees will accept.
Smart. So on the business growth side of things, what do you do to get the word out there about the business and help, generate new business and new clients?
I do a lot of in-person networking of late because I'm trying to get some more local. A lot of my clients are not local, so I'm trying to get some more local people. So I'm doing in-person networking, but I do a lot on LinkedIn. At one point, 41% of my business was coming from LinkedIn. That was just from, interacting on LinkedIn a lot, and also from having curated my LinkedIn connections in such a way that I basically have only potential clients. Well, I've got sources also.
And not just to any old person. Yeah.
Yeah, not just any old person. I've got sources like I have a lot of employment attorneys and I've got a lot of labor attorneys, more employment law attorneys than labor law, obviously, because
Yeah.
I'm representing the company more than the employee. But it's always nice to get their points of view on whatever it is that we're commenting on in LinkedIn.
Do you find you've generated business from the writing that you've done, like I mentioned, Forbes and, LegalZoom articles and things like that? Do you find you've generated business from that?
Yes, I had 32% from writing, just from my writing,
Wow.
32%. People would see the writing and then they would contact me and either see if I could come in and speak, or as we would talk, I would get a retainer or I would get a speaking gig for some conference.
Very cool. And how do you know your statistics? How did you know your numbers?
Yeah, well, I track what I do on Less Annoying CRM and Clockify. Like I'm tracking how long it takes me to do this interview. So I know how much time I'm spending on interviews per month, per quarter, per year. And I also track where the business is coming from. And that's one of the things that I have with Less Annoying CRM. It's like endlessly tailorable. I have set up in there where I've, got the client. And if it was incoming or outgoing, me searching or them searching for me and finding me. So I track those numbers.
Very clever.
Yeah.
Yeah. It shows what that pays off. And so you put that into Less Annoying CRM.
And then just run a report and I see what my
Yeah.
numbers are.
Very cool. We've talked about articles and things like that, but you've written a book. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, my book is Don't Get Sued, Get Smart, a small business's pocket guide to avoiding legal landmines. This particular book, this first book, is on the top 8 employment laws that small businesses don't know that they don't know. I tell different stories. Like the first story is actually a personal story where when I interviewed for the credit union, my, future president was asking me all kinds of illegal questions. and, and I wound up laughing at him in the interview. He's like, "What's so funny?" I said, "You can't ask me those questions. Why
Oh,
can't I ask
brilliant.
you those questions?" I said, "Because they're illegal." "Why are they illegal?" "Because they violate Title VII. "What's Title VII?" "That's Title VII of the Civil Rights Act." "I didn't know that the Civil Rights Act applied to employers." Is what I got. And I laughed. I just laughed so hard. I got up and I left the interview. I was laughing at him. And before I exited the door, I just said, "You need me more than you know." And within a couple of hours, I had an offer of employment. Within a couple of days, I had 3 or 4 more raises before I even stepped foot.
Oh, wow.
Yes, because I think what happened, I have no proof of this, but I think what happened is he had told one of his buddies on the board, who he had a really close friend who was on the board, who told him about the interview, who then told the employment lawyer that was on the board about the interview, who then also told the PHR of our was a railroad credit union, told
Yeah, yeah.
her about that. And they're like, "You need to hire her before she
Oh,
sues you." But yeah, I just kept getting raises, and I'm like, sure.
fantastic. So yeah, the book sounds excellent. Where can they get a copy?
Well, it's not in print yet, but they can pre-order off from my writer's website, which is fullcirclepress.net. If they type in dianefaulkner.com, though, it'll go to fullcirclepress.net. And there's a pop-up, and you can give me your information, and I'll put you on the list, and I'll send you a little freebie of some employment laws that you need to be aware of. Actually, all of the employment laws that you need to be aware of if you're a small employer, 49 employees or fewer.
Fantastic. Very good. So we will have the link to that in the show notes. We've covered a lot of ground, and I love hearing the backstory to the evolution, the formation of your business, and then how you're helping employers and so on. If people want to learn more about your services and maybe about the new book or even some of your writings in general, what should they do next?
They should contact me at dianefaulkner.com and just reference the show in the subject line, and I will get back with them as soon as possible.
Well, Diane, thank you very much for sharing your story and for sharing about what your business does and who it helps. And I wish you all the best for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us today on A Better HR Business, the podcast that explores the world of HR consulting and HR tech businesses. For show notes and downloads, go to www.getmorehrclients.com/podcast. That's getmorehrclients.com/podcast. Remember to subscribe and share the show with any friends who are busy growing a HR business. Thanks, and see you next time.